The cafe on the corner of the street was always alive with noise. The sound of cups clinking, laughter echoing, and soft music playing in the background made it feel warm, even on cold nights. Behind the counter, a young woman moved quietly, carrying trays of coffee and slices of pie. She didn't talk much, but her smile was gentle. Everyone knew her as the waitress who never seemed to get tired. Though her eyes sometimes showed it, her name was Lena. She had worked at the cafe for almost 3 years, taking the morning shifts and sometimes staying late to help clean after closing. Most of the customers never thought twice about her. To them, she was just part of the place, like the old chairs or the smell of roasted beans. But there was more to her than anyone knew. Every evening, when the cafe closed, Lena stayed behind to wipe down the tables and sweep the floor. She did it quietly, humming to herself. On some nights, the cafe owner asked her to clean the small stage where local musicians performed. The stage wasn't big, just enough for a microphone, a stool, and a piano that had seen better days. The piano stood there like an old memory, slightly out of tune, with scratches on its wooden surface. But to Lena, it wasn't just furniture. It was something special. Long before she started working there, Lena had loved music. As a child, she used to play on a small keyboard her father bought from a second-hand shop. She would sit for hours, trying to learn songs she heard on the radio. But when life became difficult, music slowly faded away from her days. Her parents separated, money grew tight, and lessons became a luxury they could no longer afford. She never complained, she simply stopped asking. Over the years, she learned to let go of dreams quietly without bitterness. Now every time she walked past that piano, she felt something stir inside her. It reminded her of who she used to be, before bills and exhaustion became part of daily life. She would pause for a moment, looking at it while folding napkins or stacking chairs, then continue working as if nothing happened. One night, after a particularly long day, she was the last person in the cafe. The rain outside tapped against the windows, and the smell of coffee still lingered in the air. The lights were dim and the stage looked peaceful. She had finished cleaning everything except the piano. She took a soft cloth and began wiping its surface. As she did, her fingers brushed over the keys. They felt cool under her touch, and before she realized it, she pressed one gently. The note rang out, slightly off-key but still beautiful in its own way. She froze, her heart racing a little. Then she laughed quietly at herself. "Just one note," she whispered. But that one note reminded her how it felt to play again. She pressed another, then another, and soon her hands started to move on their own. The sound filled the empty cafe, soft and hesitant at first. Then it grew stronger. Her fingers found patterns they hadn't touched in years. Lena closed her eyes and everything else disappeared. The tiredness, the bills, the long hours. It was just her and the piano. She played a melody she had written long ago, one she used to hum when life felt too heavy. The notes rose and fell like a quiet conversation with her younger self. There was sadness in it, but also something hopeful. She didn't notice that someone had entered the cafe again. The owner, Mr. Harris, had come back to get his forgotten keys. As he reached for the door, he stopped. The sound of the piano made him pause. He had heard many musicians play on that stage before, but this was different. There was something raw and real in it, something that felt alive. He stood there quietly, watching Lena from across the room. Her face was calm, almost glowing in the soft light. Her movements weren't perfect, but they carried emotion. When she finally stopped, she sighed and smiled to herself, unaware of the small audience she had just had. Mr. Harris didn't say anything right away. He waited until she stood up and began wiping the keys again, embarrassed by her own small moment of escape. "That was beautiful," he said softly. Lena turned, startled. She didn't expect anyone to be there. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I was just cleaning." "I didn't mean—" He waved his hand gently. "No, don't apologize. That was really something. I didn't know you could play like that." She smiled shyly, brushing her hair behind her ear. "It's been a long time. I just missed it." "Well," he said, picking up his keys, "you shouldn't hide it. You've got a gift there." Lena didn't know what to say. Compliments were not something she was used to. "Thank you," she whispered. When he left, she stood by the piano for a long time, looking at the keys. A small spark had been lit inside her. It wasn't about fame or dreams anymore. It was about remembering a part of herself she had almost forgotten. The next few days, she went back to her normal routine. Mornings were busy, with the smell of fresh pastries and people rushing to work. She smiled at regular customers, refilled cups, and joked with the cooks in the kitchen. But something was different. She found herself humming again, tapping rhythms on the counter when no one was looking. At night, when everyone went home, she couldn't resist sitting at the piano again. Each time she played a little longer. The music flowed more easily now, and the sound filled the quiet cafe like a warm blanket. Sometimes the streetlight outside flickered, and she imagined it was following the rhythm. One evening, as she played, she thought about her childhood, the first time she touched a keyboard, the teacher who told her she had music in her fingers, and the afternoon spent practicing in her tiny room. Life had taken her far away from that world, but here, in this empty cafe, she felt close to it again. The piano became her secret friend. It was the one thing that didn't judge her for dreaming. She didn't tell anyone about it, not even her co-workers. They wouldn't understand. To them, she was just the quiet waitress who worked too much. But every melody she played carried a story, about loss, about hope, about holding on when everything feels heavy. And though she didn't know it yet, someone else was about to notice. One rainy afternoon, a regular customer sat at a corner table while she worked. He was a local music teacher who often came to grade papers over coffee. When he saw Lena dusting the piano, he mentioned how rarely it was used these days. She smiled politely but said nothing. He joked, "Maybe one day you'll play something for us." She laughed it off, shaking her head. But deep down, she wanted to say yes. That night, after closing, she did play again, and once more Mr. Harris returned unexpectedly. This time, he didn't stay hidden. When she finished, he walked up to her and said, "You should let people hear this. I mean it, you've got something special." Lena blushed. "It's nothing," she said. "I just play for myself." He looked at her kindly. "Maybe that's why it sounds so good. It's honest." She didn't realize it then, but that simple moment would start a chain of events that would change her life. For now, though, she was just a waitress cleaning the stage after hours, lost in the sound of her own heart coming back to life through every note. As she locked up and stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The street was quiet, the air cool and fresh. She pulled her coat tighter around her and smiled. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel tired. She felt alive. The next few nights at the cafe felt different for Lena. Everything around her seemed the same. The smell of roasted coffee, the chatter of customers, the hum of the old refrigerator. But inside her, something had changed. The quiet spark that had lit up the night she played the piano hadn't gone away. It stayed with her like a secret she carried close to her heart. She tried to go about her days as usual. She served tables, smiled at regulars, and made sure everything ran smoothly. But each time she passed the small stage, she couldn't stop glancing at the piano. It was as if the instrument was waiting for her. Sometimes when the cafe was empty, she would stop and run her fingers lightly over the keys just for a second, before pulling her hand away and returning to work. Mr. Harris, the owner, watched her quietly. He hadn't forgotten that night when he heard her play. He didn't say much about it again, but every time he saw her near the piano, he smiled to himself. He had managed cafes for years and had met all kinds of people, dreamers, artists, musicians. But there was something rare about Lena. She didn't seem to realize how gifted she was. One evening, just before closing, the cafe was almost empty. A few customers lingered with their books and late-night desserts. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Lena was behind the counter cleaning cups when Mr. Harris approached her. "Hey," he said casually, "you've got a minute?" She looked up, wiping her hands. "Sure, what's up?" "I was thinking," he said, "how about you play something again tonight?" "Just a few minutes. I'll close up." Her face turned red. "Oh no, I couldn't. I mean, not in front of people." "There's barely anyone left," he said with a grin. "Besides, they'll love it. Trust me." She hesitated. The idea of playing in front of others scared her. What if she made a mistake? What if they laughed? But then she remembered how free she had felt that night alone, the way the music had brought her back to herself. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, just one song." The cafe grew quiet as she walked up to the stage. A couple at a corner table looked up curiously. She sat down and pressed a few keys to test the sound. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then slowly she began to play. The melody started soft, a gentle tune that seemed to float through the air. Conversations faded. Even the sound of the rain outside seemed to quiet down. People turned toward her, drawn by something in the way she played. Her eyes were closed, her expression calm but full of feeling. The music spoke for her. It told stories of quiet mornings, of small dreams, of finding peace after long days. When she finished, the cafe was silent for a moment. Then the small audience clapped softly, some smiling, others just sitting still as if they didn't want the moment to end. Mr. Harris clapped too. "See," he said proudly. "Told you they'd love it." Lena smiled shyly, her cheeks warm. "I didn't expect that," she said softly. "Well, you should," he replied. "That's real talent right there." Later that night, as she helped him lock up, he said, "You know, I might post a little clip of that. Just a few seconds. People should hear you." "Oh no," she said quickly. "Please don't, I'm not ready for that." He nodded, respecting her wish. But the next evening, when she played again after hours, he couldn't help recording a short piece on just 1 minute on his phone. It wasn't to embarrass her. He just wanted to capture something beautiful that he knew the world would want to see. A few days later, he posted it on the cafe's social media page with a simple caption, "Our waitress playing after closing time. You never know what hidden talent might be right beside you." Lena didn't even know he had uploaded it. She went about her day as usual, taking orders, serving coffee, laughing with the cooks in the back. But that evening something unexpected happened. The cafe's page began to explode with notifications. People were commenting, sharing, tagging friends. The video had touched something in them. It wasn't just about the music, it was about the story behind it. A hard-working woman quietly doing her job, sitting down one night to play something from the heart. Comments poured in. "This is pure emotion. Her playing made me cry. Someone find this woman and get her a piano of her own." By the time Mr. Harris showed Lena the video, it had already gained thousands of views. Her eyes widened. "You posted that?" she asked, half surprised, half nervous. "I couldn't help it," he said honestly. "Look at this. People love it." She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. "I don't even know what to say." "Say thank you," he laughed. "You've just made a lot of people's day." That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She didn't know whether to be scared or happy. All she had done was play something simple, something personal. But somehow it had reached people she'd never met. For years she thought her music didn't matter anymore, and now strangers were telling her how much it meant to them. The next morning, more people came into the cafe than usual. Some of them recognized her from the video. A few asked shyly, "Are you the one who played the piano?" She nodded, embarrassed. They smiled and said things like, "That was beautiful," or "You've got something special." She didn't know how to handle all the attention, but she thanked each person kindly. By the end of the week, local newspapers were calling the cafe, asking about the pianist Waitress. A small radio station invited her for an interview. Mr. Harris was thrilled, but Lena was hesitant. "I don't think I'm ready for that," she said. "You don't have to be ready," he replied. "Just be yourself. That's what people love about you." She finally agreed to go, though her hands trembled the whole morning before the interview. The host was kind and asked her how she learned to play. She told him honestly about her childhood, about how she used to dream of being a musician and how life took her in a different direction. She said she never thought anyone would care to listen again. The host smiled. "Well, they're listening now," he said, "and they love it." When she returned to the cafe that afternoon, everyone clapped as she walked in. She laughed, a little embarrassed but deeply touched. Later that night, after the crowd thinned out and the cafe was quiet again, she sat at the piano once more. But this time it felt different. She wasn't just playing for herself anymore. She was playing for all the people who had written to her, for everyone who had once given up on a dream. The notes flowed softly at first, then grew stronger. Her fingers moved with confidence she didn't know she had. She felt alive more than she had in years. Mr. Harris stood near the doorway watching her again. He didn't record this time. He didn't need to. He knew this moment belonged to her. When she finished, she looked up at him and smiled. "I still can't believe all of this happened," she said quietly. He nodded. "Believe it. You earned it." She looked around the cafe. The same walls, the same tables, the same smell of coffee. But everything felt new. The world had noticed her, not because she tried to be seen, but because she had stayed true to what she loved. That night, When she locked the door and stepped out into the cool air, she paused for a moment. The city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. She smiled to herself, thinking how one small moment, one quiet song, could change everything. After the video of Lena playing the piano went viral, things in her life began to change in ways she had never imagined. At first, it was small things. People began stopping by the cafe just to see her, bringing friends along and asking when she would play again. Some even brought small gifts, a notebook, a music book, a flower, saying, "We wanted to thank you for sharing your music." Lena felt a warmth she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't fame she wanted. It was acknowledgement, and finally she was getting it. One afternoon, a man came into the cafe carrying a folder of papers. He was well-dressed, polite, and moved with the confidence of someone who had been in the music world for a long time. He introduced himself as a local music teacher, someone who had seen the video online and had come to speak with her. Lena was nervous, unsure why he had traveled just to meet her. "I just wanted to say," he began, "that your playing is remarkable. I've worked with many students over the years, but there's something in the way you express yourself. It's rare." Lena's hands twisted nervously in her apron. I'm not really a professional. I just play sometimes when I can." "That's exactly what makes it special," he said. "You play because you love it, not because you're trying to impress anyone. I'd like to offer you a chance to study formally. A scholarship so you can learn more, grow more. If you're willing, of course." Lena's breath caught. She had never imagined that someone would offer her something like this. The thought of returning to school, learning from professionals, and having time to focus on music instead of just surviving was almost too much to process. She wanted to say yes immediately, but fear crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? I'll think about it," she said quietly. The man smiled, understanding. "Take your time. This offer won't disappear overnight, but I hope you'll consider it. You have a gift and it deserves to grow." That night, Lena couldn't stop thinking about the offer. She walked home slowly, the evening air cool against her face. Memories of her childhood piano lessons came flooding back. The joy of learning new songs, the pride of performing for her parents, the evenings when music made the world feel lighter. She remembered how music had always been her escape, a place where she could be herself. Now it seemed that escape could become a real path forward. The following week, Lena played at the cafe more openly. She had grown used to people watching her, and now she felt a quiet confidence she hadn't felt before. Each note she played carried her story, the struggles, the quiet hopes, and the small joys of everyday life. The cafe had become a place where music and daily life met, where people could pause for a moment and feel something real. Soon, local newspapers and websites wanted to interview her. Journalists came with cameras and microphones asking her to tell her story. Lena was shy at first, her words stumbling as she described her childhood, her family's struggles, and how music had always been a part of her heart, even when life pushed her away from it. But as she spoke, she realized that people were listening, not just hearing, but truly listening. They weren't judging her. They were inspired. With each interview, Lena felt her world opening in ways she hadn't thought possible. The cafe was still her home, her safe space, but now it was also a stage, a place where she could reach beyond her small town. People began asking if she would perform at local events, charity gatherings, and small concerts. She felt a mixture of excitement and fear. The thought of playing in front of a larger audience was daunting, but it was also thrilling. One evening, a small group of local musicians came to the cafe to meet her. They had seen the video online and wanted to invite her to play at a community concert. Lena was nervous. She had never performed in front of a crowd beyond the cafe, and the thought of stepping onto a larger stage was intimidating. But the musicians were kind and encouraging, telling her that her music had touched them deeply and that they believed she could inspire many others. The day of the first concert arrived. Lena spent hours preparing, practicing the pieces she planned to play. Her hands were sore, her nerves raw, but there was a quiet determination in her heart. She thought of all the nights she had spent cleaning the cafe, of all the moments when she had doubted herself, and of the music that had always been there, waiting for her. When she stepped onto the stage, the audience greeted her warmly. The lights were brighter than she was used to, and the room was larger, filled with hundreds of faces. Lena's hands shook slightly as she sat down at the piano. But she took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was there. She wasn't performing for fame or recognition. She was performing because music was part of who she was. As she began to play, the room fell silent. The notes flowed like a river, carrying emotion with every movement. People leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the honesty in her playing. Lena closed her eyes, letting the music guide her, letting her heart speak through each melody. She played not just with skill, but with the depth of experience of life lived quietly, of dreams that had been hidden for years. When the final note lingered in the air, the audience erupted into applause. Lena opened her eyes, surprised by the standing ovation. Tears welled up, but she smiled through them, feeling a mixture of relief, joy, and disbelief. She had done it. She had shared herself fully, and the world had listened. After the concert, people came up to her, hugging her, thanking her, telling her how much her music had touched them. Some were parents who wanted their children to learn from her example. Others were young musicians inspired to pursue their own dreams. Lena felt a connection she had never known before. She realized that music had always been her way of communicating, even when words failed her. Now she was reaching beyond herself. As the weeks passed, opportunities continued to grow. A small music school offered her a formal scholarship, allowing her to study piano and theory while continuing to work at the cafe part-time. She met other musicians her age, people who shared her passion and who encouraged her to push her boundaries. Lena began to feel a sense of belonging she hadn't felt in years. She was no longer just a waitress with a hidden talent. She was a musician, someone whose music could touch hearts and inspire others. Even with all the new attention, Lena stayed humble. She still cleaned tables, still served coffee, still took time to smile at every customer. But now, each time she walked past the piano, she felt a sense of pride. The keys no longer carried only memories of what could have been. They carried the promise of what could be. One evening, after a long day at the cafe, Lena sat at the piano alone. She played softly at first, letting her fingers find the familiar patterns. Then she played a melody she had composed herself, one that told her story, the quiet struggles, the small victories, the dreams that had once seemed impossible. The music filled the empty cafe, and for the first time she felt completely at peace. Mr. Harris came in quietly, standing in the doorway as he had so many times before. He watched her with pride, knowing that her journey was just beginning. He didn't need to say anything. The music said it all. By the time Lena left the cafe that night, she felt a new kind of energy coursing through her. She walked home slowly, the cool night air brushing against her face, thinking about the journey ahead. She had started as a quiet waitress, cleaning the stage after others had performed, never imagining that her own music could one day reach so many hearts. Now she knew that her path was just beginning, and she was ready to follow it wherever it might lead. The world had noticed her, but more importantly, she had noticed herself. And in that discovery, she found a freedom she had never known, a freedom to dream, to create, and to share her music with anyone willing to listen. After her first small concert, Lena's life began to change faster than she had imagined. The scholarship to the music school opened new doors, and she found herself meeting people who shared her passion for piano and music. Her days became a balance between her work at the cafe and her lessons at the school. It wasn't always easy. Some days she was exhausted, running on little sleep, but she felt more alive than ever before. Her teachers at the school were impressed. They said she had a natural talent, something that couldn't be taught. Lena was shy, but she listened and practiced diligently. Every piece she learned, every new technique she tried, she approached with care. She wanted to make the music feel alive, not just technically correct. Her favorite moments were when she could close her eyes and let her hands move freely, letting her emotions guide the notes. One day, her music teacher called her into his office after class. He looked excited. "Lena," he said, "there's a pianist coming to town next month. He's well known nationally and he wants to hear you play. This could be a huge opportunity." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had never performed in front of anyone famous, and the thought was intimidating. I don't know if I'm ready," she said quietly. Her teacher smiled. "You're ready. You just don't know it yet. This is a chance to show the world what you can do. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about being true to yourself." The weeks that followed were filled with practice and anticipation. Lena spent hours each day at the piano, sometimes at the cafe after hours, sometimes at the music school. She played old melodies she had written, learning how to bring out their depth and emotion. She practiced scales, finger exercises, and even experimented with improvisation. Slowly, her confidence grew. The day of the visit finally arrived. The famous pianist entered the cafe quietly while Lena was playing. She didn't notice him at first, absorbed in the music. When she finally looked up, he was standing by the door watching her with a smile. Lena's hands trembled slightly, but she took a deep breath and began to play again. The music flowed, each note carrying her story, her quiet struggles, her small joys, her determination to follow her passion despite the challenges. The pianist listened carefully, his expression softening with every chord. When she finished, the cafe was silent for a long moment. Then he clapped slowly, deliberately, and smiled. "That was incredible," he said. "You have something very rare. You don't just play notes, you speak with them. I want to invite you to perform at a small concert I'm organizing. It's intimate, but the audience will be serious music lovers. Would you consider it?" Lena felt a mixture of excitement and fear. Performing for a larger audience, especially one that included professionals, was intimidating. But she remembered the feeling she had the first time she played alone in the cafe, and then when the small local audience listened. She nodded. I would love to try." The next few weeks were intense. She practiced relentlessly, learning to control her nerves and refine her technique. Sometimes she felt overwhelmed, wondering if she could meet the expectations of such an important audience. But each time she sat at the piano, she reminded herself why she was doing it, not for fame, not for praise, but because the music was part of who she was. When the day of the concert arrived, Lena felt nervous as she stepped onto the stage. The venue was small, intimate, and filled with people who appreciated music deeply. She took a deep breath, sat at the grand piano, and let her fingers find the keys. The first notes trembled slightly, but soon, the music began to flow. She played with all her heart, every melody telling her story. The quiet afternoons spent cleaning the cafe, the nights she had played alone, the moments of fear and hope, the joy of discovery. The audience was captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others sat forward in their seats, watching her every movement. When she finished, the applause was immediate. People stood, clapping and cheering. Lena felt tears prick at her eyes. She had done it. She had shared herself fully, and it had been received with love and respect. After the concert, several people approached her. A few were music producers, others were local musicians, and some were just audience members who had been deeply moved. One older pianist with a kind smile and gentle eyes said, "You have a gift that goes beyond talent. You have heart. Keep playing like this and you will touch many lives." Lena walked home that night feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The city lights reflected off the wet pavement and she breathed deeply, feeling the cool air fill her lungs. Her life had changed, but she felt grounded. The music had always been inside her, waiting for the right moment. Now she was finally letting it speak. In the following weeks, more invitations came. People wanted her to play at charity events, small music festivals, and community gatherings. Each time, Lena felt a mix of nerves and excitement, but she also felt a deep sense of purpose. She wasn't just playing notes on a piano, she was sharing her story, her soul, and her journey with others. Her days at the cafe continued as usual, but now the cafe felt different. It was no longer just a place to work. It was a place that had nurtured her, where she had found her voice again. Customers noticed the change in her too. She moved with a quiet confidence, her smile warmer, her presence brighter. People often asked her to play when they visited, and she did so gladly, sharing her music with anyone willing to listen. Even with all the attention and opportunities, Lena remained humble. She remembered the nights she had spent cleaning the cafe, the quiet moments when she had played alone, the fear and doubt that had almost held her back. She knew that the journey wasn't just about talent, it was about heart, persistence, and staying true to oneself. One evening, after a long day at the cafe and a successful performance at a local music festival, Lena sat alone at the piano. She played softly, letting her fingers find the familiar patterns. The notes carried a sense of reflection, of gratitude, and of quiet triumph. She thought about how far she had come, from a shy waitress cleaning the stage to a pianist who was beginning to be recognized beyond her small town. Mr. Harris appeared in the doorway, smiling quietly. He had been there from the beginning, watching her grow, encouraging her in small ways that mattered more than he could have known. "You've come a long way," he said softly. Lena smiled back, feeling a warmth in her chest. "I couldn't have done it without this place," she said. "Without you letting me play and without this piano." He nodded. "Sometimes the right place at the right time makes all the difference. But the rest, that's all you." Lena realized he was right. She had worked hard, practiced endlessly, and followed her heart even when fear tried to stop her. The piano hadn't just been an instrument. It had been a bridge between who she was and who she could become. As the weeks turned into months, Lena continued to grow as a musician. She met other talented artists, learned new styles, and began to experiment with her own compositions. Each performance, whether small or large, was a step forward, a chance to connect with people through music. Her story began to spread beyond the city. People shared her performances online, telling the tale of the quiet waitress who had hidden her talent for years, only to reveal it in moments of honesty and courage. Messages arrived from strangers saying that her music had inspired them to pick up an instrument again, to pursue a dream they had abandoned, or simply to find beauty in the small moments of life. Through it all, Lena remained grounded. She continued to work at the cafe part-time, still cleaning tables and serving coffee, still moving quietly among the customers. But now there was a new energy about her, a quiet confidence that came from knowing her worth and following her passion. One evening, after a long day, Lena sat at the piano and began to play. The music filled the cafe, soft and comforting, yet powerful in its emotion. She closed her eyes, letting herself be carried by the melody. For a moment, it was just her and the piano, and everything else faded away. When she finished, she looked around the empty cafe and smiled. She had come a long way from the quiet nights of cleaning the stage alone. Her music was reaching people now, touching hearts in ways she had never imagined, and she knew that this was only the beginning. Months had passed since Lena's first small concert, and her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The cafe where she worked still held her heart. It was the place that had nurtured her quietly, where she had found her music again. But beyond its walls, the world was beginning to notice her in ways that felt both thrilling and terrifying. One day, Lena received a letter from a city she had only ever visited in passing. A renowned concert hall was hosting a special event featuring emerging pianists from around the country. The letter invited her to perform. She held it in her hands, reading and rereading the words as her heart raced. The opportunity was enormous. It was the kind of stage she had once only dreamed about in quiet moments when she practiced alone. And now it was real. For days, Lena could hardly think about anything else. The thought of performing in front of a large audience in a hall known for its grandeur and its critical listeners made her stomach churn. Fear mingled with excitement in a way she had never felt before. She would have to leave the comfort of her cafe, the safety of the familiar piano, and step into a world where her music would be judged, not just heard. Her teachers encouraged her. "Lena, you are ready," one said. "You have talent, but more importantly, you have heart. When you play, people feel it. That is something no amount of training can give. Trust yourself and let the music speak." Lena practiced like never before. She spent hours at the piano, refining each piece she intended to perform. She worked on her posture, her fingering, and even the subtle expressions on her face. But most of all, she focused on feeling the music, on letting it tell her story. Each night after the cafe closed, she played alone, imagining the audience in the concert hall. Sometimes she imagined applause. Sometimes she imagined silence. Each scenario was a test of her courage. The night of her departure came. She packed her things carefully, her music sheets, a few personal items, and a small photograph of the cafe, the place where it all began. As she left her town, she felt a mix of sadness and excitement. She would miss the quiet streets, the familiar smells of coffee and pastries, and the warmth of people who had always believed in her. But she also felt ready to embrace what lay ahead. The concert hall was magnificent. The grand building rose like a palace, with lights shining on its facade, and the entrance buzzing with people in elegant clothing. Lena felt small as she stepped inside, her hands shaking slightly. She took a deep breath and reminded herself of all the nights she had spent alone at the piano, of all the moments when music had been her refuge. She was ready to share that part of herself with the world. Backstage, she met other pianists, some of whom had already performed in prestigious venues. They were confident, polished, and professional. Lena felt a wave of doubt. She was just a waitress from a small town, someone who had only recently begun performing publicly. How could she compare? But then she remembered the words of her teachers, and more importantly, she remembered why she played. Not for comparison, not for applause, but because music was part of who she was. Finally, it was her turn. The stage manager called her name and Lena walked forward. The hall was filled with hundreds of people, all waiting quietly. She approached the grand piano at center stage, its polished surface reflecting the lights above. She took a deep breath and let her fingers rest lightly on the keys. The audience was silent, waiting for the first note. The first chord rang out, soft but clear. Lena closed her eyes, letting her heart guide her hands. She played slowly at first, each note deliberate, each phrase carrying emotion. Memories of the cafe, of quiet nights spent cleaning the stage, of the first time she had played in front of Mr. Harris, all flowed through her fingers. The music was her story, her journey, her voice. As she continued, the music grew richer, fuller. She moved through melodies she had composed herself, mixed with pieces she had learned at the music school. The audience was captivated. Some leaned forward in their seats, others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Lena felt a connection she had never experienced before, the energy of the audience flowing into her, her music reaching out to touch them. She played with everything she had. Her fingers danced across the keys, sometimes delicate, sometimes strong. Each note carried her joy, her fears, her hope, her gratitude. The hall seemed to breathe with her, the light soft on her hands, the echoes of sound filling every corner. She was no longer the shy waitress from a small town. She was a pianist, a storyteller, a woman sharing her soul through music. When the final note lingered in the air, there was a moment of stillness. Then applause erupted, louder and more overwhelming than anything she had ever heard. People stood, clapping and cheering, some with tears in their eyes. Lena's chest swelled with emotion. She had done it. She had stepped onto a stage that had once seemed impossible, and she had played from her heart. After the performance, several people came backstage to meet her. Some were musicians, others were event organizers, and a few were journalists. They praised her playing, her emotion, and the honesty in her performance. One older pianist with a gentle smile said, "You play like someone who has lived through life, who knows its quiet struggles and joys. That is rare. Keep playing, and you will touch countless lives." Lena felt tears in her eyes, but she smiled. She remembered the cafe, the quiet nights of practice, the fear she had once felt, and the small steps that had brought her here. She realized that every note she had played, every hour she had spent practicing, had led to this moment. And it wasn't just about talent, it was about heart, perseverance, and staying true to herself. The days after the concert were a whirlwind. Offers came for more performances, invitations to music festivals, and opportunities to collaborate with other artists. People from different cities reached out, inspired by her story. Lena was careful, choosing the opportunities that felt right, those that allowed her to continue growing without losing herself in the excitement. Even with all the attention, she returned to the cafe whenever she could. It was still her anchor, the place where she had discovered her music again. Customers noticed the change in her, too. She moved with a quiet confidence, her smile brighter, her presence more commanding yet gentle. Some would ask her to play during quiet evenings, and she did so gladly, reminding herself and everyone else that music could be a simple joy, not just a performance. One evening, after a long day of practicing and meetings, Lena sat alone at the piano in the cafe. She played softly at first, letting her fingers explore the keys without pressure or expectation. Then she began a piece she had composed, one that told her story. The nights she had cleaned the stage, the first time she had played alone, the people who had encouraged her, and the journey that had led her here. Each note carried her memories, her fears, her triumphs, her dreams. When she finished, she looked around the empty cafe and smiled. She realized how far she had come. From a quiet waitress who cleaned the stage after hours to a pianist who had performed on a grand stage in front of hundreds of people. She understood now that the piano had been more than an instrument. It had been a bridge between who she was and who she could become. Mr. Harris appeared quietly in the doorway. He watched her for a moment, a proud smile on his face. "You've done well," he said softly. Lena smiled back. "I couldn't have done it without this place," she replied. And without you believing in me, he shook his head gently. You believed in yourself. I just held the door open. The next weeks brought more growth. Lena composed new pieces, blending her personal experiences with the techniques she had learned. She began teaching a few young students who reminded her of herself at that age, curious, hesitant, but full of potential. She shared her story with them not to boast, but to show that talent and hard work, combined with courage, could take them far. One evening, after a particularly inspiring practice session, Lena looked at the piano in the cafe and felt a deep sense of gratitude. Every scar on its surface, every slightly off-key note had been part of her journey. It had been there when no one else noticed, waiting for her to return, and now it continued to be her companion, reminding her that music was not just about the applause or the recognition. It was about connection, expression, and truth. As she packed up for the night and stepped out into the cool city air, Lena thought about the journey she had taken, from the quiet nights cleaning the stage, to the small concerts in her town, to the grand performance in the concert hall. Every step had mattered. She understood now that the path of music was not just about reaching the audience. It was about discovering oneself along the way. Lena smiled to herself. She had come far, yet she knew this was only the beginning. The music would continue to guide her, challenge her, and inspire others. And she would always remember the quiet moments that had started it all. The nights alone in a small cafe, the old piano waiting patiently, and the simple act of daring to play, even when no one was watching. In that moment, she realized the truth she had learned through every note. Every performance and every challenge, talent may open doors, but it is courage, persistence, and heart that carry you through them. And with that knowledge, Lena felt ready for whatever came next, knowing she would always play with honesty, humility, and love. The waitress who had once cleaned the stage had become a pianist who could touch the hearts of hundreds. And yet, she remained the same person at her core, kind, humble, and deeply connected to the music that had always been a part of her soul.